Back in the 70s and 80s, horror didn't just live in theaters. It crept into your living room. With nothing more than a flickering screen and a late-night time slot, these made-for-TV movies managed to summon something deeper than jump scares. Witches, possessions, telekinesis, haunted houses, ancient cults. No topic was off limits, as long as it fit in a 2-hour broadcast window and wrapped before the news. So if you're looking for something eerie, fun, and a little terrifying, here's your ultimate guide to the greatest made-for-TV horror movies. While it had a limited theatrical release, The Car aired so often on network TV that it burned itself into the memory of late-night viewers. Set in a quiet desert town, things take a dark turn when a blacked-out Lincoln Continental begins running people down.
Oh my God, what is this guy doing?
With no driver behind the wheel. James Brolin plays the sheriff trying to stop the chaos, but it isn't just a typical hit-and-run case. The car smashes through funeral processions, crashes into homes, and even flips police cruisers like they're toys. It moves with intelligence, cruelty, and purpose, as if something evil is driving from the inside. The car may be a product of its time, but there's something unnerving about the idea of a powerful machine acting on pure malice. The mayhem still hits hard, and the imagery lingers long after it's over. Originally airing on CBS in 1981, Dark Night of the Scarecrow is a TV movie that feels way meaner and more effective than it has any right to be. It starts with the wrongful death of a mentally challenged man named Bubba, who's gunned down by a group of small-town vigilantes. And that's just the setup. After the men escape justice, something begins picking them off one by one. A scarecrow appears in their fields, watching silently, and the air gets colder. There's no gore, no elaborate effects, just a slow, quiet sense that payback is coming. What makes it so creepy isn't just the revenge plot. It's the way the fear builds in the men who caused the harm. Paranoia sets in, and the justice they thought they got away from starts creeping back in, one step at a time. Before Jaws, before E.T., Steven Spielberg made his directing debut with this lean, relentless thriller for ABC's Movie of the Week in 1971. Dennis Weaver stars as a traveling salesman driving through the desert when he's suddenly targeted by a faceless trucker in a massive, rusted-out semi. The execution is sharp, no explanation and no backstory, just pure, merciless pursuit. The truck feels alive, stalking Weaver's car like a predator, revving its engine with menace and always staying just out of reach. The fact that we never see the driver makes it even more unnerving. It's not a man chasing him, it's something. Duel turns wide-open highways into claustrophobic death traps, and what starts as a petty road incident quickly spirals into a nightmare. It's stripped down, smart, and somehow still scarier than most monster movies. Trilogy of Terror is one of the most famous and flat-out fun horror anthologies ever made for TV. Airing on ABC in 1975, all 3 segments star Karen Black in different roles. But it's the final story, Amelia, that burned itself into the minds of anyone who watched it and probably kept a lot of people from sleeping that night. It starts simple. A woman buys a Zuni fetish doll for her boyfriend, only for it to come to life and start attacking her inside her apartment. The doll is small, fast, and totally unhinged, biting, stabbing, and tearing through furniture with sharp teeth and a tiny spear. There's a manic energy to the whole thing that makes it feel like a nightmare you can't shake. Karen Black sells every second of it, going from confused to terrified to something else entirely. The first 2 stories have their moments, but the last one is pure chaos, and it still freaks people out today. Based on Stephen King's novel, CBS aired Salem's Lot as a two-part miniseries in 1979. But it didn't feel like your average TV horror movie. It follows a writer who returns to his hometown just as people begin to vanish, and something terrible takes up residence in the abandoned house on the hill. Starring David Soul, James Mason, and Bonnie Bedelia, among others, there's a stillness to the town that feels off from the beginning. Empty streets, shuttered windows, and the sense that no one's really safe once the sun goes down. The vampires here aren't romantic or stylish. They're pale, rotted, and hilariously weird.
Look at me. Look.
There's something unsettling about how Salem's Lot treats the idea of home. Bedrooms, porches, familiar streets, none of it offers any protection once the sun goes down. It's a vampire story, sure, but it's also about what happens when the places that are supposed to keep you safe start turning against you. The slow, suffocating mood settles in early and never really leaves. It looks like a normal suburban setup. New house, fresh start, trying to move on after a family tragedy. But Don't Go to Sleep doesn't stay quiet for long. The youngest daughter starts talking to her dead sister.
Mom, it's me. No. No!
And before anyone can make sense of it, the rest of the family begins to suffer a string of strange, deadly accidents. Premiering on ABC in December of 1982, the movie stars Valerie Harper, Dennis Weaver, and Ruth Gordon. There's no ghost in a sheet, just a creeping feeling that something in the house wants revenge. The tension builds in small, unsettling moments, and it's the kind of terror that gets under your skin because it feels so personal. Grief, guilt, and something unspoken worm their way through every scene. By the end, you're not sure what's worse, the haunting itself, or the family it's feeding on. Elizabeth Montgomery plays a woman who heads to her sister's remote country house during a storm, worried after a strange phone call. When she arrives, the house is unlocked, the lights are on, but her sister is nowhere to be found. The phone lines are down, and the longer she waits, the more it starts to feel like someone else is in the house with her. It aired on ABC in November of 1972 and was produced by Aaron Spelling, who was turning out high-quality TV thrillers throughout the decade. It moves at a deliberate pace, letting the silence and stillness do most of the work. Montgomery spends much of the movie alone, pacing from room to room, trying to piece together what's happened, while something just out of frame seems to be watching. There's no score pushing the tension, no big action scene to break things up. It's all about simplicity, space, suspicion, and the kind of fear that comes from not knowing what's waiting just beyond the next door. One of the strangest and most disturbing made-for-TV movies ever aired, Bad Ronald premiered on ABC in 1974 and quickly earned a reputation as a cult oddity. Scott Jacoby stars as Ronald, a socially awkward teen who accidentally kills a neighbor girl and hides inside a secret room in his house, even after his mother dies and a new family moves in. The movie's strength is how it builds tension through claustrophobia and warped perspective. You spend most of the time with Ronald, watching as he spies on the unsuspecting family through peepholes and slowly descends into a fantasy world of his own creation. It's low budget and tame by today's standards, but the concept is undeniably creepy. What makes Bad Ronald linger is how mundane everything feels. A suburban nightmare hiding just behind the walls. Premiering on ABC in 1973, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark scared a lot of kids who had no business staying up that late. Kim Darby plays a woman renovating an old house when she discovers a sealed fireplace and something living behind it. Before long, she's hearing whispers, seeing shadows dart through the room, and realizing she's not alone. The creatures themselves are small and strange, but it's the way they move and how no one else seems to notice them that makes it all feel creepy. Darby's descent into fear isn't loud or frantic. It's quiet, methodic, and completely believable. For a movie made on a TV budget, its low stakes makes it incredibly effective. The whispers, the dim lighting, the sense that something is just out of frame was terrifying. You don't need jump scares when the house itself feels like it's watching. ABC kicked off the decade with one of the first truly supernatural TV movies, Crowhaven Farm. Hope Lang plays a woman who inherits a quiet farmhouse in New England, only to discover that the land is hiding a very dark past. Strange neighbors, eerie visions, and whispers of old witch trials make it clear she's not exactly moving into a fixer-upper. What makes it memorable isn't just the witchcraft angle, but how it starts like a daytime soap that slowly mutates into a nightmare. By the time the past starts bleeding into the present, you realize you've been pulled into something much stranger than a typical haunted house story. Past life visions, secret rituals, and a growing suspicion that she's somehow been here before. And by the time you realize what the townspeople really want from her, it's already too late. Premiering on ABC in October of 1970 and produced by Aaron Spelling, The House That Would Not Die stars Barbara Stanwyck as a woman who moves into a colonial-era home in Pennsylvania with her niece, played by Kitty Wynn. Almost immediately, the house seems off. Strange noises, disembodied voices, and a lingering presence that won't let go. Richard Egan co-stars as a local professor and neighbor who guides the women through the house's dark past. There's a seance, there's possession, and the question isn't just whether the house is haunted, but whether it's using its new occupants to settle old scores. The vibe is quiet and eerie, built on silence, stares, and just enough jolts to keep everyone guessing. As the past begins to seep into the present, the house tightens its grip, and whatever's buried in the home's history, violent, unfinished, and unresolved, refuses to stay silent. Originally airing on NBC in October of 1978, Summer of Fear stars Linda Blair as a teenage girl who starts to suspect her cousin isn't who she says she is. After a family tragedy, a mysterious relative named Julia comes to stay with them, and almost immediately, weird stuff begins happening around the house. What starts as jealousy and tension soon turns into full-blown paranoia, as Linda Blair's character becomes convinced that Julia is using witchcraft to manipulate those around her. Horses go wild, tempers flare, and people start behaving in ways that don't feel like themselves. Directed by Wes Craven, just a year after The Hills Have Eyes, the movie blends suburban drama with supernatural horror, pushing teen angst into darker, more occult territory. Lee Purcell is especially eerie as the smiling, soft-spoken cousin who might be hiding something much older and much darker beneath the surface. It's a slow burn, but one that builds to a fiery climax, packed with seances, hexes, and a final reveal that's pure 70s TV movie witchcraft. This House Possessed blends glossy soap opera, stalker thriller, and supernatural horror into one of the strangest haunted house TV movies of its era. First airing on ABC in February of 1981, Parker Stevenson stars as a pop singer recovering from a breakdown who rents a secluded high-tech mansion to get some rest. He brings along his young nurse, played by Lisa Eilbacher, but the house seems to have its own plans for her. Rooms light up on their own. The security system seems alive, and before long, the house is behaving less like a structure and more like a jealous, possessive presence, watching, isolating, and punishing anyone who gets in the way. Despite the title, it's not clear whether the house is possessed sentient, or simply haunted by its past. What is clear is that it doesn't like being told no. The deaths get stranger, the visions more intense, and the house's obsession with Lisa becomes the real source of terror. Not everything makes sense, but for a TV movie about a lovesick murder mansion, it doesn't have to. First airing on NBC in March of 1969, Fear No Evil stars Louis Jourdan as Dr. David Sorrell, a psychiatrist who starts investigating the mysterious death of a patient and uncovers something far stranger than mental illness. The man's widow claims he was haunted by a mirror and that it may have followed him from beyond the grave. What begins as a standard psychological case turns into something occult, with dreams that bleed into reality and visions tied to ancient forces. Dr. Sorrell finds himself drawn into a world of cursed objects, secret rituals, and people who seem possessed by something they can't explain. It was part of an early attempt by NBC to launch a supernatural procedural, and while the series never happened, it performed well enough in the ratings for the network to commission a sequel, Ritual of Evil. NBC brought back Louis Jourdan as Dr. David Sorrell for this second occult mystery, airing in February of 1970. This time he's called to an upscale California estate to help a young woman suffering from disturbing visions after the suspicious death of a friend. What seems like a standard consultation turns darker as he uncovers a web of secrecy involving wealthy socialites, cryptic symbols, and a possible satanic cult. As more pieces fall into place, it becomes clear that whatever's happening isn't just psychological, and the danger is spreading. Ritual of Evil is more like a supernatural detective story, with Sorrell acting as the skeptical outsider trying to make sense of the unraveling reality. It builds on the tone of the first film, but expands the scale, pulling in themes of ritual magic, spiritual possession, and moral decay hiding beneath luxury. The Initiation of Sarah aired on ABC in early 1978 and feels like a perfect time capsule of late 70s TV horror, part teen melodrama and part psychic revenge movie. Kay Lenz plays Sarah, a painfully shy college freshman who doesn't fit in, especially next to her more glamorous sister. When they rush different sororities, things get ugly fast, and then weird. It turns out Sarah has telekinetic powers, and the meaner the girls get, the more her abilities start bubbling to the surface. There's classic TV movie hazing, creepy house rituals, and supernatural payback. Shelley Winters plays the spooky sorority house mother, like she's one step away from full-on witch, and Morgan Fairchild steals a few scenes as the queen bee of the rival house. One of the most talked about moments back then was Fairchild getting pushed into a fountain during a hazing scene, and ending up in a now infamous wet t-shirt shot that sparked plenty of controversy for 1978 network television. Airing on ABC in January of 1972, The Night Stalker stars Darren McGavin as Carl Kolchak, a rumpled reporter chasing a bizarre series of murders in Las Vegas. The victims are all young women, and each one has been drained of blood. As Kolchak digs deeper, he becomes convinced the killer isn't just another criminal, but something far more unnatural. The police, the mayor, and pretty much everyone else wants him to drop it. But Kolchak keeps pushing, convinced he's on the trail of a real-life vampire. Written by Richard Matheson and produced by Dan Curtis, the movie blends horror, crime, and newsroom chaos with a fast pace and a streak of dry humor. It was a huge success, the highest-rated TV movie of its time, and popular enough to warrant a follow-up, The Night Strangler. A year later, Kolchak was back, this time in Seattle, where women are turning up strangled with marks on their necks and traces of rotting flesh on the wounds. The Night Strangler aired in 1973 and picks up right where the first movie left off. Once again, Kolchak is the only one willing to believe there's something supernatural behind the killings, and this time, it involves secret tunnels, ancient rituals, and a killer who hasn't aged in over 100 years. It has the same mix of horror and newsroom chaos, but leans harder into the occult. It was successful enough to launch a full series later that year. If The Night Stalker felt like a one-off surprise, The Night Strangler made it official. Kolchak had a real knack for digging up things best left buried. Originally broadcast on Fox in May of 1991, The Haunted claims to be based on the true story of the Smurl family, an ordinary couple from Pennsylvania who believed their house was under constant attack by an unseen force. It starts small, strange smells, cold spots, banging on the walls, but things escalate quickly. Scratches, levitations, full-blown apparitions. Even the family dog seems spooked. The Smurls eventually call in Ed and Lorraine Warren, yes, those Warrens, who declare the house to be infested by a demonic presence. Sally Kirkland and Jeffrey DeMunn play the parents, and the whole thing has a dead serious early 90s tone that makes it feel even creepier. There's no camp or knowing winks, just a slow, heavy descent into full-on possession territory. It's not subtle, but it's effective, especially if you watched it as a kid and never forgot that one scene with the shadow on the wall. A straight-up haunting movie, and one of the most memorable network TV horror offerings of the era.
Look out, it's the midnight hour, baby!
Airing just after Halloween in 1985, The Midnight Hour feels like what would happen if Thriller, Clue, and Are You Afraid of the Dark all collided on a sleepy suburban street, set in a small New England town including LeVar Burton, Dick Van Patten, and Sherry Belafonte, where a group of teens accidentally recite an ancient curse that brings the dead back to life. Zombies, vampires, and colonial witches start crawling out of the woodwork, and the town quietly slips into chaos, all while the adults remain completely oblivious. There's a prom queen ghost, a zombie dance number, and enough fog machines to power an entire decade of music videos. It's fun, colorful, and packed with Halloween atmosphere. The kind of movie that's more campy than scary, and somehow feels like childhood, even if you've never seen it before. Airing on NBC in 1977, less than a year after Carrie was a big hit in theaters, The Spell treads similar ground, but brings it into your living room. Susan Myers plays Rita, an awkward high schooler constantly bullied for her weight and shut out by her peers.
I heard she was really slim until she started eating everything in sight.
What they don't know is that she has telekinetic powers, and she's starting to use them. A young Helen Hunt plays her sister, while Lee Grant plays her mother. She begins to suspect something unnatural is happening, but struggles to connect with a daughter who barely speaks to her anymore. The tension builds in small, unnerving ways. Classroom accidents, strange behavior, people getting hurt without explanation. Instead of going big and bloody, the movie keeps things tight and personal. It's about resentment building under the surface, the kind you carry home, hold in, and eventually release when no one's looking. A group of polite, wide-eyed children flag down a passing motorist on a lonely country road and ask for help. They lead him back to their farmhouse, introduce him to their many brothers and sisters, and insist he stay for dinner. It all seems innocent enough, until it becomes clear he's not allowed to leave. That's the setup for All the Kind Strangers, airing on ABC in 1974 and starring Stacy Keach as the stranded traveler, and Samantha Eggar as another adult already caught in the trap. The children, orphaned and desperate to rebuild a family, have decided that these strangers will be their new parents, whether they want to be or not. The kids are never monstrous, just eerily calm and ruthlessly determined. The fear comes from their control, the isolation of the farmhouse, and the way the walls start to feel like a cage they can't escape from. It's Christmas Eve, the rain is coming down in sheets, and four sisters return to their childhood home after years apart. Their father is bedridden, bitter, and convinced his new wife is slowly poisoning him. Whether or not that's true, the atmosphere inside the house is just as stormy as the weather outside. Airing on ABC in November 1972, the cast was stacked. Jessica Walter, Sally Field, Eleanor Parker, and Julie Harris, all circling each other with suspicion while the tension climbs higher. Old grudges resurface, family secrets crack open, and then the bodies start piling up. Part mystery, part slasher prototype, Home for the Holidays takes a cozy holiday setting and twists it into something mean and claustrophobic. Every shadow looks like danger. Every knock at the door feels like it could be the end. And it's the kind of TV movie that makes you think twice about heading home for Christmas. Airing on CBS in 1972 and directed by a young Steven Spielberg, Something Evil tells the story of a family that leaves the city behind for a quiet farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. Darren McGavin and Sandy Dennis play the couple settling in, but it's not long before strange noises, jars of red goo, and unexplained voices suggest the place came with something extra. Their young son begins acting strangely, and Dennis's character becomes convinced that an evil spirit has taken hold of her. Is it imagination, stress, or something darker moving through the house? The movie keeps that question open while the horror slowly rises. While still early in his career, Spielberg's directing talent is obvious and on full display. Even within the limits of a network TV budget, he's able to elevate the story with his stylish touches and feelings of tension that would define many of his later movies. It's a small story, but with his hands on it, Something Evil becomes something more memorable. The Norliss tapes begin with a writer who vanishes, leaving behind a stack of recorded tapes filled with strange investigations into the supernatural. Each tape plays like a case file, stories of possessions, occult experiments, and creatures that shouldn't exist. Produced by Dan Curtis and airing on NBC in 1973, Roy Thinnes plays David Norliss, the missing author whose voice guides us through the tapes, and Angie Dickinson co-stars as one of the people caught up in his final, unfinished case. The pilot was meant to launch a weekly series, but even as a standalone movie it works. Moody, episodic, and packed with gothic atmosphere. It feels like a cousin to The Night Stalker, with its mix of investigative drama and supernatural menace, and it remains one of the more stylish, what could have been projects of 70s TV horror. Airing on ABC in 1972, the premise for When Michael Calls is simple. The phone rings late at night, and on the other end is the voice of a child, a boy named Michael, who died years ago. At first it seems like a cruel prank, but the calls keep coming, and every time they do, something terrible happens. Elizabeth Ashley leads the cast as the aunt, with Ben Gazzara alongside her, and a young Michael Douglas in one of his earliest roles as her estranged husband. The movie mixes grief with menace, turning a telephone into the source of horror. Every ring is another reminder of loss, or maybe something worse reaching out from beyond. It's basic, but designed to torment anyone who picked up the phone after dark. NBC's Dead of Night premiered in 1977 as a made-for-TV horror anthology with 3 standalone stories, all directed by Dan Curtis. The first segment, Second Chance, follows a man who restores a classic car, only to discover it can drive him back in time. The second segment, No Such Thing as a Vampire, revolves around Alexis, played by Anjanette Comer, a woman who falls prey to a scam involving vampires. It leans gothic with a woman convinced she's being stalked by something supernatural, while her husband insists there's a more rational explanation. But it's the third story, Bobby, that leaves the biggest impression. A grieving mother performs a ritual to bring her drowned son back, and he does return, but not as she remembers him. Most of the story takes place inside their house, where the mood shifts from sorrow to fear with almost no warning. It feels like a waking nightmare. Quiet at first, then panicked and relentless. The fear creeps in slowly, and once Bobby starts to change, there's nowhere left to hide. The Legend of Lizzie Borden aired on ABC in 1975 and stars Elizabeth Montgomery, best known as the lovable witch from Bewitched, playing one of the most infamous murder suspects in American history. The movie walks a delicate line. Technically, it's based on real events. Lizzie Borden was tried for the axe murders of her father and stepmother in 1892. So, this is history, kind of. But the movie takes some bold liberties. It flashes between courtroom drama and psychological breakdown, with eerie hallucinations, memory gaps, and one infamous sequence where Lizzie slowly disrobes before delivering the final blows.
Abby?
It's less a whodunit and more of a maybe she did it and kinda liked it. And the fact that it aired in prime time, with no disclaimers, just a cheery announcer intro and straight into patricide with the star of Bewitched, makes it one of the most chilling and weirdly classy TV movies of its kind. A made-for-TV movie with full creature suits, desert biker chases, and Emmy-winning monster makeup? 1972's Gargoyles was weirdly impressive for something that aired on CBS at 8 p.m. The plot is pure pulp. A father-daughter research team stumbles across a nest of ancient winged creatures in the desert. And from there, it's all slow-mo attacks, echoing roars, and philosophical monologues from the head gargoyle himself.
There are perhaps maybe a dozen of us. We mean no harm.
The creatures are dudes in foam suits, sure, but it feels like a Halloween special that got way out of hand, but in the best way. The fact that this much latex and fire made it onto primetime TV is honestly kind of a miracle. It's part creature feature, part fever dream, and totally unforgettable once you've seen it. Imagine The Omen, but instead of a creepy kid, it's a German shepherd possessed by Satan. That's the premise of Devil Dog, Hound of Hell, which aired on CBS in 1978. It features family favorite Richard Crenna battling his own household pet, who may or may not be the literal Antichrist. The dog is adopted after a backyard breeder holds a secret cult ceremony, and from there, the family starts acting strange. There's talk of demonic possession, hypnotic suggestion, and the dark forces are at work. In the final act, a full-on mystical showdown between Crenna and the dog, complete with glowing eyes and a flaming sword, sounds ridiculous. And it is. But Devil Dog built a quiet cult following over the years. As absurd as it gets, there's something about it that still feels a little terrifying. Airing on ABC in 1973, the eyebrow-raising Satan's School for Girls has everything you could want from a late-night TV oddity. Moody lighting, whispered threats, students who may or may not be in a cult, and a headmistress who's definitely hiding something. It centers around a young woman who enrolls at an elite girls' school to investigate her sister's mysterious death, only to uncover a possible satanic cult hiding in plain sight. Pamela Franklin plays Elizabeth, while Kate Jackson and Cheryl Ladd round out the cast, just a few years before their Charlie's Angels fame. There's no gore. The jolt is the premise. Teenagers manipulated by occult authority figures, broadcast to millions on a weeknight. It's ridiculous and over the top for network television, and exactly the kind of movie that made you think this was really on TV. 1985's Deadly Messages starts with a Ouija board and somehow ends with a full psychological breakdown and electroshock therapy in between. Kathleen Beller stars as Laura, a woman whose roommate is murdered right after using the board to contact a ghost named David. But when the police arrive, there's no body, no crime scene, and no one believes her. From there, it unravels fast. Strange attacks, shifting identities, and revelations that Laura may have escaped from a mental hospital and stolen someone else's life. Dennis Franz turns up as one of the skeptical cops, adding to the sense that no one around her is quite on her side. It's messy, melodramatic, and exactly the kind of movie that makes you want to ask, who approved this script, and what messages were they getting? The Bermuda Depths aired on ABC in 1978 and somehow managed to be a giant sea monster movie, a ghost romance, and a lost childhood trauma all at once. The story follows a marine biologist who returns to Bermuda and reconnects with a mysterious woman from his past, played by Connie Sellecca, who may or may not be a spirit tied to a centuries-old curse. There's also a massive, possibly demonic, sea turtle, and Carl Weathers. Produced by Rankin Bass, the same people behind claymation Christmas specials, the film has an eerie, hazy tone that feels like a dream you can't quite shake. There are long underwater sequences, moody flashbacks, and dialogue that sounds like it's being whispered through a fog bank. It's not violent or explicit, but it feels deeply unsettling, like the kind of movie you watched once as a kid and then spent years wondering if you imagined it. And honestly, you might have been better off. Barbara Eden, best known for I Dream of Jeannie, stars as a woman who suddenly finds herself pregnant, despite her husband just having had a vasectomy in 1974's The Stranger Within. What starts as a domestic mystery slowly shifts into weird, otherworldly sci-fi territory as her behavior grows more erratic and inhuman. She craves salt, avoids light, and begins acting like someone, or something, else entirely. It's eerie, low-key, and oddly effective, like a quiet invasion story hiding inside a made-for-TV melodrama. By the end, it's not clear what just happened, but you'll definitely remember it. At first glance, it looks like a typical teen thriller. A high school girl starts receiving threatening notes, the phone keeps ringing, and no one around her seems to take it seriously. But Are You in the House Alone slowly reveals itself to be something much darker. Beneath the made-for-TV pacing and soft-focused lighting is a story about sexual assault, trauma, denial, and how the people you trust can sometimes be the ones to fear. It never gets explicit, this was still network TV, but the implications are heavy, especially for a movie airing on CBS in 1978. Starring Kathleen Beller in her second movie on this list, as well as a young Dennis Quaid in one of his earliest TV roles. It's not a great movie, but it lingers, less for what it shows and more for the subject matter, especially in the context of when and how it was broadcast. She Waits aired on CBS in 1972, starring Patty Duke as a newlywed caught in the grip of a jealous spirit who refuses to move on. The story follows Laura, who moves into her husband's family home, only to find that his late wife still casts a long shadow. At first, it's just uneasy silence and tension with her mother-in-law. But then come the whispers, the strange moods, and the growing sense that Laura isn't entirely herself anymore. As she starts to unravel, it becomes clear that the past isn't just lingering in the air, it's fighting to take over. Patty Duke carries the movie with a performance that flips from vulnerable to almost trance-like, and while the pacing is slow, it erupts in a final emotional confrontation. It's one of those TV movies where not a lot happens, until suddenly, everything does. James Ferrantino plays Kevin Leahy, a defrocked priest who dies in a car crash, only to be resurrected. In 1977's The Possessed, airing on NBC, he's sent back to Earth with a new purpose: to root out evil as a kind of reluctant exorcist. His next stop? A Catholic girls' school in Oregon, where things have started to burn, literally. Unexplained fires break out across campus. Students and faculty are rattled, and the school's headmistress, played by Joan Hackett, begins to unravel. Claudette Nevins co-stars as a teacher whose daughter also attends the school, and Harrison Ford appears in an early role as another staff member, just 3 weeks before Star Wars would make him a household name. What starts as a mystery becomes something much darker, with possessions, confessions, and a final blaze that settles the score. The story is uneven at times, but the intensity and atmosphere make it feel like a knockoff of The Exorcist, but not in a bad way. Airing on ABC in January 1975, Satan's Triangle opens with a Coast Guard rescue mission deep in the Bermuda Triangle. A schooner is found drifting at sea with just 3 bodies on board. The only survivor is a woman named Eva, played by Kim Novak, who seems dazed but unharmed. Doug McClure plays the officer who stays behind with her, and as they wait for extraction, she tells him what happened.
We're going to die on this boat, you know. Just like the others.
A story filled with strange rituals, levitation, and the sense that something evil was hiding in plain sight. The longer they talk, the more the lines start to blur between survivor and suspect, reality and something much darker. It's a slow, eerie descent into something supernatural, and by the end, you're not sure who or what to believe. Joan Collins, Dirk Benedict, and Ray Milland are just a few of the familiar faces aboard Cruise into Terror, a made-for-TV mashup of satanic horror and disaster movie tropes. Airing on ABC in February 1978, it follows a pleasure cruise through the Gulf of Mexico that takes a dark turn when passengers discover an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus in the ship's cargo hold, supposedly containing the son of Satan himself. From there, things spiral fast. Nightmares, mysterious deaths, and religious panic start to take hold. It plays like The Love Boat by way of The Omen, with serious faces delivering wild dialogue about prophecies and evil awakening at sea. It doesn't always make sense, but it's the kind of strange, star-stuffed oddity that could only have happened in the 70s, and only on TV. Airing on ABC in December 1973, The Cat Creature is a pulpy blend of ancient curses, antique dealers, and one very aggressive black cat. The story kicks off when a valuable amulet is stolen from the estate of a dead occult collector, and people start turning up clawed to death shortly after. Meredith Baxter plays a student drawn into the mystery, while David Hedison tries to piece things together before more bodies drop. There's talk of cat-worshipping cults, reincarnation, and a spirit that may have returned in feline form. It's more style over suspense, with foggy graveyards, glowing eyes, and a tone that feels closer to a 1940s B-horror throwback. It won't terrify you, but if you've got a soft spot for slow-moving supernatural TV mysteries, this one definitely qualifies. Betty Davis plays the steely matriarch of a New England farming village in 1978's The Dark Secret of Harvest Home. Airing over 2 nights on NBC, the miniseries follows a city family that moves to the rural town of Cornwall Coombe, a place proud of its traditions and strangely protective of its harvest rituals. At first, life in Cornwall Coombe seems peaceful, maybe a little too peaceful. But beneath the surface is a tight-lipped community with rules that don't always make sense. David Aykroyd plays the husband who starts asking the wrong questions. And through it all, Betty Davis holds the center with a performance that's both nurturing and intimidating.
We'll turn our backs on him and shun him. He is forbidden to all. He is Bane.
The further things go, the clearer it becomes. Tradition isn't just respected here, it's enforced. Airing on CBS in February 1973, The Horror at 37,000 Feet puts supernatural terror on a transatlantic flight. A commercial jet is hauling part of a ruined English abbey back to the US, including an altar tied to an ancient druidic cult. Once airborne, strange things begin to happen. The temperature drops, objects move on their own, and passengers start losing control. William Shatner plays a former priest with a drinking problem, reluctantly drawn into the chaos as whatever's in the cargo hold begins to stir. The rest of the cast is a who's who of 70s television, all trapped at cruising altitude with an evil no one can explain. It's a bizarre mix of disaster movie and cult horror, complete with chanting spirits and in-flight possession, like The Exorcist meets Airport 1975, all crammed into one haunted red-eye. Clint Walker leads a six-man construction crew in 1974's Killdozer, a TV movie where the villain isn't a ghost or demon, it's a possessed bulldozer. Airing on ABC, it starts when the crew uncovers a buried meteorite on a remote island, unleashing an alien force that takes over their equipment. From there, it's a battle for survival as the dozer stalks the men one by one, flattening tents, crushing vehicles, and cutting off any way out. Robert Urich and Neville Brand round out the cast, with the story leaning into isolation, paranoia, and the sheer helplessness of fighting something that doesn't eat, sleep, or stop. It's simple, strange, and driven by a concept that's hard to forget. Even if you only saw it once,